Okay, so Danny, let's start by your story is an extraordinary story about how you learned about climate change. You've been in the field for a long time, seeing all the changes. Could you briefly give us a kind of overview of your journey to being concerned?
Well, I first heard about the global warming issue in 1978, almost 32 years ago, when I was a first year graduate student at the University of Toronto. And one of my professors, an eminent climatologist, Ken Hare, was talking about the global warming issue back then in 1978. So I looked into the literature, into the science of global warming as it existed in the mid to late 1970s. And my conclusion was, holy crow, this is a serious issue. This is a big issue. Now, I was moving in a different direction academically, but by 1980, I made a career change, so to speak. I decided, the global warming issue is important. It's what I want to work on. So I've been involved scientifically in the global warming issue since 1980, so the last 30 years. So I found the science of the mid to late 1970s convincing. And the public may not realize this, but a lot of the key fundamentals were worked out beyond any remaining reasonable doubt in the 1930s, 1940s. Other key elements of the problem were worked out definitively in the 1950s. Okay, so by the 1970s, there was a clear indication of danger. And a prudent society at that time would have taken precautionary action. Precautionary means you're not 100% certain that this is a real problem, but it's looking that way, and we have only one planet. We were facing the prospect of large, rapid, and irreversible changes with potentially serious consequences. That was the picture in the mid to late 1970s. And so what's happened in the last 30 years, and I've been following it intimately from the inside, the science has become stronger than ever. Okay? We've begun to see things, many things, that were mere predictions in 1978. And in the last 10 years in particular, we've come to realize that the impacts of the projected warming are going to be much worse than we thought, especially for ecosystems, for the survival of other species of life, and for the well-being of humans.
Now, can you maybe give an example that would really illustrate that?
Well, we've realized that life is a complex web, okay, and it's really very sensitive, highly attuned to the present climate, and so a 2-degree warming is now projected to push 1/6 to 1/3 of the terrestrial, the land-based species, beyond the point of no return towards eventual extinction, a mere 2 degrees warming. By the end of the century, we face, under business as usual, a very high probability of 4 to 6, 7, even 8 degrees warming. And we're talking now 50, 80, 90% species extinction. This is absolutely devastating. I mean, this is a horrendous impact of, our very short-lived fling with all this material prosperity and our obsession with comfort and convenience, and the whole consumer society is what's driving the emissions which lead to these foreseeable consequences.
So when you look at the history of this, and not only the climate science in terms of the scientific community, but also in terms of how the public has responded, what are some of the most striking things that you notice as you kind of have this long view of history? Are we just in a long pattern of denial or minimizing, or have there been times we've been more responsive? Can you give us a picture of that?
Well, what strikes me, and especially in the last few months with all this nonsense about emails and IPCC minuscule errors, what has struck me is how easily the public is misled and how easily the public can be confused on the global warming issue. There a number of books have come out which have documented quite clearly there has been a deliberate concerted effort funded by the fossil fuel industry and by other industrial interests to create confusion, to create this idea of controversy where there is no real controversy, where the science has been pinned down. Of course, there are disagreements concerning some of the details, but I mean, the fundamental science is well pinned down. But that's not the perception that the public has. So you see, scientists are used to doing research, publishing it in open, peer-reviewed scientific journals where there's open criticism, and you know, it's the facts that prevail, whereas industry, media, advertising, they're more interested in creating perceptions, right? And they have professional public relations people who put spins on things, who can, and you know, I mean, these emails, this whole ClimateGate stuff, I mean, some hackers got in and went through 3,000 emails and found 4 or 5 that, taken out of context, completely out of context, give the misleading, and it's a completely misleading perception that scientists are trying to cover up things or are conspiring to make something appear that isn't. So scientists are badly losing the public relations battle, and I think this is a serious issue. And I think, you know, we have to now devote more of our time. We have to take some of our effort away from doing real research, trying to find out the truth, in trying to convey that information to the public, because the people on the other side are not interested in the truth. That is evident from the obvious and blatant distortions of the facts, the cherry picking of facts in a way that any, you know, reasonably intelligent high school or grade school student can see is meant deliberately to deceive and mislead.